My name is Rachel Morgan, 36 years old, a single mom to a 6-year-old daughter named Ellie. That day, while I was signing her out of ballet class like every Thursday afternoon, my phone pinged with a message. I thought it was a dinner reminder from my husband. But no, it was just 3 short sentences. Going to Portugal with Harper. I've transferred all the money to my personal account. You'll have to handle rent on your own. I stood frozen in the hallway, pen slipping from my hand. Ellie was still chirping, "Mom, did you bring the dinosaur cookies today?" And me. I realized my world had just been unplugged. Without a sound. Have you ever been thrown off a cliff by the one person you trusted most? If this story resonates with you, leave a comment, hit like, and follow the channel. Because what happened next wasn't just a divorce. It was a battle to reclaim dignity, for my daughter, and for myself. I met Ethan Carter at a photography exhibit in Boston, back when I was an editor for a literary magazine focused on contemporary fiction. He stood next to his black and white frames, confident but not arrogant, and when he started talking to me, it wasn't the images that caught my attention, it was the way he spoke about the people he photographed. As if he were telling stories of old friends the world had forgotten, but he hadn't. Particularly, I'm not someone who falls easily. I was raised by my mother, Evelyn, a rational, strong woman who went through a bitter divorce and raised me alone. She always taught me to stand on my own 2 feet. And yet, just 3 months after we started dating, I introduced Ethan to her, and strangely enough, she warmed to him almost instantly. "This one's stubborn, Ethan," my mom said during their first dinner together. "But, if you're patient, she'll be a partner like no other." Ethan only smiled, gently squeezed my hand under the table. "I don't want her to change a thing, Miss Evelyn. I love her exactly as she is." That simple, sweet sentence made my mother smile. And me, I believed it. I believed I'd finally found someone who didn't want to mold me into some ideal version, but loved me as I was, every edge and curve. We got married nearly 2 years later, a small wedding at the park by Crystal Lake, the place I used to dream of as a teenager. Ethan wanted something grander, but I didn't. I just wanted people who truly wished us well, and I thought I had that. At the time, I didn't know that some people were there to celebrate, but never really wished me lasting happiness. After the wedding, we moved to the suburbs of Portland. I kept up with my fast-paced editing work, while Ethan began taking photography jobs for travel magazines and weddings. He was talented, I never denied that, and the bookings came in steadily. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was enough. In the quiet evenings, I liked curling up in an armchair reviewing manuscripts while he tinkered with his photos in the office. I loved that peace. A kind of happiness that didn't need to announce itself. When I got pregnant with Ellie, things started to shift. I had to scale back my workload due to health issues. And after she was born, I decided to stay home for her early years. My mom had retired by then and helped out occasionally, and I continued doing freelance editing for small publishing houses. It was Ethan who encouraged me to stay home. "I'll take care of the finances," he said as we looked at newborn Ellie sleeping in her crib for the first time. "You've done enough. Let me carry this part." Once again, I believed him. I held on to that promise like sunlight every morning. At first it seemed fine. Ethan landed a big wedding shoot in Napa Valley, then a series of travel gigs for a popular blog. But then, small signs started creeping in. One night, I found a strange charge on the credit card. A new camera worth nearly $4,000 that he'd never mentioned. He said it was an investment for the business, then brushed it off with a light kiss on my forehead. Then came Harper. Harper breezed into the photography studio Ethan had opened with a few friends near downtown. Young, energetic, great with people, and, according to Ethan, fantastic at organizing. He said she managed the studio's schedule, clients, even the finances. "You'll like her," Ethan once told me. "Harper handles the things I'm bad at. Kind of like you do." I laughed, didn't probe further, because in my heart I believed Ethan was someone who would never betray me. I thought love, when it was genuine, could anchor someone in place. But maybe I was naive, or maybe I'd just gotten too used to trusting. No one had ever broken that trust so completely. One morning while making coffee, I overheard Ethan talking in his office. The door wasn't fully closed, and I heard Harper's name again and again. His voice was hushed, but at times almost pleading. "You can be the temporary name on it. I just don't want Rachel to get suspicious." I froze, my hand gripping the coffee mug so tight I thought it might shatter. But I didn't knock. Didn't ask questions. I walked straight out to the garden, letting those words fall into the space between trust and doubt, a place I had lived in for far too long. I told my mother the next day, when Ellie and I visited her. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "Don't wait until there's nothing left to walk away. A woman like you can stand before she's pushed." I nodded but didn't act. There was still something in me, maybe old hope, maybe fear, that held me back from facing the truth. I didn't know that a few weeks later Ethan would actually leave, without explanation, leaving behind only a text message and a financial crater deep enough to swallow all hope. But in that moment, when my mother said those words, my chest tightened in a way I would only understand later. It wasn't pain. It was warning. I sat on the living room couch, dim ceiling light casting shadows over the coffee table where our bank statements lay scattered. I'd gone over the number dozens of times. $61,400. Gone. Our entire shared savings, the money I'd carefully built over 7 years of freelance editing, the fund meant for medical emergencies or if I needed to return to full-time work, wiped clean. All that remained was $412 in our checking account, and rent $1,950 due in less than a week. I didn't cry, couldn't cry. Something thick and solid lodged in my throat, like my whole body was bracing itself, not to break. The phone rang, startling me. I looked at the caller ID and felt my heart skip a beat. Janice Carter. My mother-in-law. I hadn't spoken to her since last Christmas, when she scolded me for spoiling Ellie too much, after I refused to let her have candy before dinner. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. "Rachel?" Her voice came through, sharp and angry, no greeting, no preamble. "I just spoke to Ethan. He said you're refusing to let him see Ellie. Is that true?" I closed my eyes. Ethan had made his move. "Janice, I'm not keeping anyone away," I said slowly. "Ethan's the one who disappeared. He sent a text, emptied the accounts and left with Harper. And Ellie, she hasn't even had time to understand what's happening." "I don't believe you," she cut me off. "He showed me your message. You said if he didn't pay more, he wouldn't get to see her. You're using the child as a bargaining chip." I shot up from my seat. "What message? I never said anything besides those 3 words. Thanks for the update. Who could have made something like that up?" "Don't play dumb," Janice nearly screamed. "Ethan told me you've always looked down on him, burdened him with debt, and now you're demanding outrageous support payments just to get revenge." I clenched the phone in my hand. "Do you know who paid the rent for the last 6 months? I did. With money from my editing jobs, my freelance work, and even from the college fund I was secretly building for Ellie, because Ethan always spent more than he earned." The silence on the other end stretched for almost a full minute, but when Janice finally spoke again, her voice hadn't softened. "Maybe you think you've done a lot, but Ethan has dreams. He needs freedom to grow. You just held him back, controlled him, caged him, and now you're doing the same thing to Ellie." I froze, breath caught in my chest. "I'm the one who takes her to school every morning, reads her bedtime stories every night, makes her meals, buys her shoes when she outgrows them. Ethan went on a week-long shoot in Oregon and didn't call once. And I'm the controlling one?" "Ethan told me," Janice said, stressing every word, "that you're planning to take Ellie to Michigan to live with your mother. If you dare do that, I'll sue for custody." My body shook. "What are you planning to do?" "I've already spoken with a lawyer. If necessary, I'll prove you're mentally unstable. I have plenty of witnesses." "Witnesses?" I laughed in disbelief. "You mean relatives who only see me during the holidays? Or you, who once forced me to make Ellie sleep alone when she had a fever because children shouldn't cling to their mothers?" Janice hung up without another word, and in that moment, everything became clear. I wasn't just abandoned by Ethan. I had been betrayed, deliberately, by the woman who once called me the perfect daughter-in-law. I covered my face and sank to the cold floor, bitterness rising in my throat. A very familiar bitterness. The kind a woman feels when she's painted as toxic simply for living truthfully and protecting her child. Not long after the doorbell rang, Ellie came running from her room, her hair still messy from her nap. "Mom, who is it?" I wiped my face, forcing a smile. "Probably the mailman, sweetheart." I walked to the door and saw a thick envelope with a red legal seal. I knew, without even opening it, that it was the official divorce summons. But what I didn't know was that inside were far more than papers. There were inhumane demands Ethan had set, and a whole new chapter I'd have to fight through to protect my daughter. I reached out to Marisa Bloom after a nearly sleepless night. It was the first night I truly accepted that Ethan wasn't coming back. Not to apologize, not to explain. He had retreated, strategically, armed with money, rehearsed lies, and a system that was already taking his side. Marisa was a woman in her early 40s, dark brown hair in a tidy bun, a calm low voice, and sharp eyes. Her office was on the 3rd floor of a red brick building near downtown Portland. Dark wood shelves lined the walls, a family photo sat on her desk, and the space felt both warm and unyielding. "Miss Mitchell," she began, flipping through the documents I brought. "Your case may be complicated, but the good news is I've handled worse, and I don't lose." "I don't need him back," I said. "I need fairness, and I need to protect my daughter." Marisa nodded as if that was the very reason she accepted the case. She asked about financial history, joint accounts, any suspicious behavior I'd noticed from Ethan. I told her everything, the expensive camera receipt, odd expenses under the studio's name, and the last time Ethan had posted any work, nearly 3 weeks ago. "You said he's still receiving money from the studio?" Marisa asked, scribbling notes. "I'm not sure," I replied. "He's not posting anymore, but it seems like he recently started selling photo rights." Marisa looked up. "Then we need to trace those transactions. If he received a major payout from a foreign company, that money could have gone into a private or offshore account." She turned the screen toward me. "What's the name of the photo company?" "Solstice Visuals, based in Lisbon." "Europe," Marisa murmured. "He may be setting up residency or registering foreign income to dodge financial obligations here. It's not new, but if we can prove he's earning while abandoning his child, the court won't take it lightly." I don't know what made me share the next detail. Maybe because it haunted me. Maybe because, even if it sounded strange, it felt important. "There's one more thing," I said quietly. "This morning I received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a folded note, no signature. Just one sentence. If you want to know where Ethan's hiding the money, look inside the wooden box his mother keeps locked away." Marisa looked up sharply, eyes like blades. "You kept the note?" I nodded and pulled it from my purse. She examined it closely, then set it aside. "Someone wants to help you, but can't do it publicly. Could be someone who worked with Ethan, or Harper herself." I blinked. "Harper?" "Never underestimate how a mistress feels when she realizes she's been played to," Marisa said flatly. "Either way, we won't ignore this lead. Do you know which box they're talking about?" I stayed quiet for a moment, then the image of an old wooden box with carved patterns surfaced. One Janice always kept on the high shelf in her bedroom. Locked, dusted weekly. "There is a box like that," I whispered. "At my mother-in-law's house." Marisa looked at me carefully. "I don't advise taking anything without legal clearance, but if it's considered marital property and might be moved or hidden, the court needs to know." I left her office with a long to-do list. Bank statements, tracing transactions, and possibly confronting Janice. But what truly left me breathless was the feeling that I'd entered a labyrinth. Every clue led to a locked door. And the first key might be inside the house I once called my in-laws. That night I made myself a cup of tea and poured a warm glass of milk for Ellie. She sat at the kitchen table, coloring in her ballet dress, still not changed. "Are we visiting Grandma Janice tomorrow, Mom?" Ellie asked casually. I paused. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because I missed the box. Grandma let me put cards in. She said it had magic secrets inside." I looked at my daughter, my nose stinging. She didn't know it, but that innocent remark confirmed something for me. That the box wasn't just sentimental. I bent down and kissed her hair. Maybe. We'll stop by sometime soon. I wasn't lying. But I also didn't tell her that the next time we visited Janice's house, I wouldn't be going alone. I'd be bringing a lawyer. And a phone ready to record. I arrived at Janice's house on a Tuesday afternoon. A light rain had started to fall, the street leading into the suburb was slick, and the trees stood still, as if holding their breath for what was about to happen. Ellie stayed with my mom, and I held a bag of apple scones, Janice's favorite, in my hand, trying to muster the familiar smile, the kind a daughter-in-law wears when showing up to keep the peace. Janice opened the door after 2 rings. She wore a moss-green knit robe, her hair freshly curled, dark lipstick in place as usual. But her eyes scanned me from head to toe, clearly on guard. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. I held out the pastry box, softening my voice. I don't want things between us to stay tense, Janice. After all, you are Ellie's grandmother. She hesitated, then reluctantly stepped aside. Come in, but I don't have much time. I sat on the familiar brown leather couch in the living room. Everything looked exactly the same as the last time I was there. Faux flowers arranged just so, childhood photos of Ethan on the shelf, the place so clean it felt suffocating. Janice poured tea, without offering. Then sat across from me, posture stiff like I was on trial. So, are you here to apologize or to demand something? I gave a small smile, keeping my tone as humble as I could. No demands, it's just that Ethan's gone, and I thought maybe you and I could come together for Ellie. Janice tapped her fingernail against her teacup. I think Ellie's doing just fine with Ethan. But if you're finally starting to see that, maybe you're beginning to mature. I didn't react. Her jabs had become routine over the years. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to observe. And I saw it. The dark brown wooden box with antique brass trim, sitting silently on the shelf behind Janice, just beneath her wedding portrait. You still keep that old box? Ah, I said lightly, trying to sound casual. I remember Ellie always begging you to tell her the magic secret inside it. Janice pressed her lips together, not responding. You once said you kept letters from when Ethan was in college, I continued. I've always wondered, what else is in there? Janice looked up, eyes sharp. It's none of your business. Of course, I'm just curious. The conversation turned dull after that. I excused myself to use the bathroom. On my way back, I suddenly walked by the bookshelf. Janice was busy on a phone call in the kitchen. I had exactly 2 minutes. I gently lifted the lid of the box. It wasn't locked. Inside were stacks of handwritten letters, some printed financial documents, a faded notebook, and a blue birthday card. I didn't have time to read through them. I randomly pulled a bundle of letters and quickly photographed each page with my phone. When I heard Janice coming back, I immediately placed everything back, closed the lid, and stepped back as if browsing old books. I told you not to go near that part of the living room. I turned around and smiled. I was just looking at old pictures. I'll head out now. On the way home, I parked in an empty lot near the park and opened my phone, reviewing each photo. Under the dim car light, the truth appeared, clear and cruel as a slap. One letter dated July 15th, 2 years ago, contained Janice's handwriting to Harper. If Rachel continues to show signs of instability like she did after giving birth, we can use that in the custody file. I know a good family lawyer. What we need is for Ethan to appear as the stable parent, and for her to be seen as a soft threat. My chest tightened. I remembered that time after Ellie was born. I'd gone through 3 months of mild postpartum depression. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. I cried alone in the bathroom. But I overcame it. Without meds, without hospitalization, through love and patience. And now? It was being weaponized. Another letter in Ethan's handwriting. I recognized his pen strokes. Read, "Thanks, Mom, for helping me get started with Harper. Without that Bermuda account, We couldn't have carried out the plan. I owe you big. Everything inside me went cold. Offshore account. Bermuda. Marissa had been right all along. I saved all the photos, set the phone down on the passenger seat, and closed my eyes for a moment. Some cracks in the heart never fully heal. But when you discover you were the target of a coordinated takedown by the man you called your husband and the woman who called you daughter, that crack becomes fire, a quiet fire, but one that never dies. 2 days after photographing the documents in Janice's wooden box, an email from Shelley Monroe, content director at River and Pine Publishing, appeared in my inbox. Subject: confirming project withdrawal. I frowned. River and Pine was my latest client. I had just accepted an editing job for 3 debut manuscripts. It wasn't a huge contract, but enough to cover half a month's living expenses. I had spent nearly 2 weeks working with the author. Everything was going smoothly. I opened the email. Rachel, we're sorry to hear you've chosen to withdraw from the project. While we understand divorce can affect work focus, we hope to collaborate again in the future. Best, Shelley. I froze. I never sent any withdrawal letter. I immediately called Shelley. Her voice on the other end sounded hesitant. Rachel? I thought you sent us an email last week withdrawing from the project for personal reasons? I never did, Shelley. I didn't write any such email. She sighed. I understand there might be some confusion, but I still have the email on file that we received from your address. Please forward it to me. A few minutes later, I received the forwarded message. The tone was clumsy, grammatically broken. Nothing like anything I'd ever write. To River Pine, I no longer have mental capacity to do project. I withdraw and hope understand. It was impersonation, a sloppy hand trying to mimic me, but without understanding my writing style. I read it again, heart pounding. And I knew instantly this wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. I called Marissa. You need to see me right away, I said, unable to hide my anger. Ethan just did something unforgivable. Less than an hour later, I was in Marissa's office, my laptop screen showing the fake email. She read it line by line, her calm expression hardening into steel. Aim crossed the line. I clenched my hands together. I lost the contract, my credibility, and if I hadn't caught it, it would have kept happening. This is no longer just a family matter, this is identity fraud, and if he sent that email using your name to sabotage your work, it's deliberate financial interference. Can I press charges? Not only can you... We immediately contacted the Portland Police Department. Marissa prepared the complaint, attaching the original email, Shelley Monroe's statement, and a side-by-side comparison of my actual writing and the forgery. I will also ask the court to review this behavior during the divorce hearing, Marissa added as she gathered the files. It shows that Ethan is attempting to sabotage your financial independence to manipulate the outcome of the case. A decent court will not overlook that. I nodded, though my mind was still rattled. Being impersonated. Having someone use my own name to cause my downfall wasn't just infuriating. It was a violation at the deepest level. That night, after Ellie had gone to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, soft yellow light spilling across the old wooden table. I thought of Ethan, how he used to say, "You're irreplaceable. You have something no one else does." And now he was imitating me? My voice, my phrasing, just to weaken me. I reopened the photos on my phone. The thank you letter Ethan had written to Janice, the one referencing getting started with Harper. I once thought it was proof of betrayal, but now I saw it for what it really was. Evidence of a coordinated plan. Ethan didn't leave out of desperation. He withdrew like a chess player executing a prearranged strategy. And that fake email? It was his checkmate. I texted Marissa. We need to check recent activity on my email. If he accessed it, there might be more. She replied immediately, I'll send a technician in the morning. We'll trace the IP address. I turned off the lights, sat in the dark, and listened to the ticking wall clock. Ethan wanted me to break. He wanted me confused, cornered, disoriented, so it'd be easier to take Ellie, easier to convince the world I was unstable. But what he didn't know was this. I had survived postpartum depression. I had made it through sleepless nights, through standing in the living room clutching my baby and silently thinking, I can't do this anymore, and still made it through. Compared to that, a forged email? was merely the opening move in a battle I had no intention of losing. News that Ethan had returned to the US came to me by chance, or more accurately with a cruel sense of irony. I was making tea in the kitchen when my phone rang. It was Jenna Marks, an old friend from NYU who had studied with me in Harper. She now worked as an editorial assistant at a business magazine in San Francisco. "Rachel?" Jenna's voice came through alongside the sound of typing. "I just saw Harper Lawson's name in a financial news segment. Thought you might want to see it." "Which Harper?" "The one your ex ran off with," Jenna said with a sigh. "She's shown standing next to an Israeli investor who backs fine art photography ventures. But Ethan, he's nowhere in the frame." I opened the article Jenna forwarded. There was Harper, beaming beside a salt-and-pepper-haired man. The caption below read, "Harper Lawson confirms long-term partnership with the Lyron Image Fund." I stared at the screen. Ethan wasn't mentioned, wasn't pictured. Harper had left him behind. That night, I received an email from a strange address. Ethan_Carter82@protonmail.com. No subject line, no greeting. "I'll be back in Chicago soon. We need to talk. Don't make this worse." I forwarded it to Marissa immediately. She called me back in under 10 minutes. "We're filing for an emergency restraining order." I nodded, voice tight. "He says we need to talk." "I don't believe he means a conversation. I think he means intimidation." Marissa wasn't surprised. "Either way, we won't let Ethan near you or Ellie without legal oversight. I'll file first thing tomorrow morning. If you get flight details, let me know." 2 days later, Ethan booked a flight from Lisbon. I found out through a tech associate Marissa had hired to track his recent IP activity and transactions. He used an old email address to sign into a booking app, linked to a digital wallet that had previously received payments from the studio in the US. The flight landed at O'Hare on a Friday afternoon. I arrived 3 hours early, flanked by 2 police officers and holding a copy of the emergency order. I stood silently in the international arrivals area, heart pounding, fingers gripping the court summons. People bustled around, airport lights reflecting off polished floors. Ethan emerged from Gate 7, backpack slung over one shoulder, wrinkled shirt, hair longer than I remembered. He scanned the crowd. Then saw me. "Rachel?" he called, walking quickly toward me, face a mix of surprise and nervousness. "We need to talk." I didn't respond. One of the officers stepped forward, hand outstretched with paperwork. "Ethan Carter, you are prohibited from coming within 200 feet of your former wife and daughter until further court notice. This is a copy of the restraining order and a summons from the Cook County Court." Ethan turned to me, face reddening. "I'm her father." "Father?" I shot back. "Then where were the support checks, the calls, the letters from Lisbon? What kind of father disappears and only returns when he's the one abandoned?" Ethan stepped back, clearly shaken by my composure. But his eyes flashed something else, something close to fear. "Rachel, I didn't have a choice. Harper said she'd help me start over. I cut him off. "She didn't help you start over. She helped you see what you really are. A burden no one wants to carry." The officers led Ethan to a separate area to sign the documents. I stood still for a moment, watching the man who once called me irreplaceable now being escorted out of the terminal. Not in handcuffs, but stripped of control. That night I told Marissa everything. She said, "This unexpected appearance could help us prove in court that Ethan isn't just negligent, he's a personal safety risk." I nodded, eyes on the drawing Ellie had left on the table. 2 figures stood in front of a small house under bright yellow sun. On the roof she'd scribbled, "Mommy plus me." There was no Ethan, and I didn't need to explain anything. Ellie was already forgetting him in the most natural way a child can, by no longer speaking his name. Cook County Courthouse, Monday morning. The air in the courtroom was thick, tension pressing against every breath. I sat beside Marissa at the petitioner's table, a heavy file in front of us. Ethan sat 1 row away, disheveled, his shirt collar crumpled beneath a cheap blazer. He looked at me once, I didn't look back. This wasn't the place for old glances. This was where truth was unearthed like layers of rotting carpet, and I wasn't here to pity anyone. The judge entered. The hearing regarding the divorce petition and custody dispute between petitioner Rachel Morgan and respondent Ethan Carter is now in session. Marissa rose. Your Honor, today we present evidence that the respondent not only abandoned the family and unilaterally withdrew all marital assets, but also colluded with relatives and a third party to build a false narrative for custody by manipulating the petitioner's past medical records. The courtroom fell silent. The judge tilted his head. Proceed, Ms. Bloom. Marissa placed a file in front of the judge. We submit a series of emails between Ms. Janice Carter and Ms. Harper Lawson in which they discuss using the plaintiff's postpartum depression diagnosis as legal grounds to pursue custody of Ellie Carter. In one message, Janice clearly wrote, "If Rachel continues to show signs of instability, we can leverage her medical history as evidence." The judge skimmed a few lines, then looked toward the defendant. Does the respondent have anything to say about this? Ethan started to rise, but his attorney quickly tugged on his sleeve and whispered something. Eventually the lawyer stood and spoke smoothly. Your Honor, my client was unaware of these communications. If such content exists, it was initiated solely by Ms. Janice Carter without Ethan Carter's instruction or consent. Marissa remained unfazed. Then, Your Honor, we request permission to call the next witness. The courtroom doors opened and Harper Lawson stepped in. She wore a light gray blazer, her hair neatly tied back, makeup subtle, but the confidence she once carried, the belief that she could build a life from someone else's ruins, was no longer there. Ethan turned around, his face drained of color. Harper approached the stand. Her voice trembled slightly, but remained steady. I swear that the testimony I'm about to give is true to the best of my knowledge and memory. Ms. Lawson, Marissa began, you had a personal relationship with the respondent, correct? Yes, Harper replied, avoiding Ethan's gaze. We lived together in Lisbon. He called it a fresh start. Did you ever hear him talk about a plan to gain custody? Harper paused. Yes, he said. Rachel thinks she's smart for putting everything in her name. But I've prepared enough to take it all, money and the kid. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Ethan bowed his head and his lawyer quickly objected, but the judge raised a hand to silence him. Do you have any recordings or documents to support this testimony? Harper reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a USB drive. I have an audio recording, accidentally captured while I was using my phone to log our work schedule. It's unedited. Marissa accepted the drive and handed it to the court clerk. A speaker played the recording aloud. Ethan's voice rang out clearly. It doesn't matter what name she signs. When the time comes, my mom will handle the lawyer. Harper will be my witness. Rachel will never win if she's seen as mentally unstable. I told you, just create the right conditions, and Ellie will be mine. The judge tapped his pen slowly against the bench. Mr. Carter, the testimony and evidence presented suggest a coordinated scheme to manipulate the divorce and custody process. Marissa continued, her tone softer now, but no less sharp. We request that the court grant immunity to Ms. Harper Lawson on the condition of full cooperation, including the release of all relevant documents regarding hidden assets and the full communication log with the respondent over the last 18 months. The judge nodded. Reasonable request. A follow-up hearing will be scheduled to review supplemental evidence. In the meantime, the respondent is barred from leaving the state, all shared assets are frozen, and visitation rights are temporarily suspended. I sat silently, eyes locked on the judge's bench. At last I saw the light fall on the truth. The cost of betrayal doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it's unmistakable. Ethan lost the case. The court granted me full custody of Ellie, our shared assets including the remaining funds in the Bermuda account, the photo royalties from the Portuguese company, and my years of financial contribution were restored in full. Janice was charged with identity fraud and conspiracy to commit financial deception, not just against me but also the Lisbon employer Ethan had once worked with. As we left the courthouse, Marissa gave my hand a gentle squeeze. You didn't just win the case, she whispered. You reclaimed your life. No one doubted me anymore. No one believed the story of a controlling mother or clingy wife. There was no need to strike back, the truth had done its job. In the weeks that followed, I began rearranging the small apartment Ellie and I lived in. Anything that carried Ethan's scent or shadow I boxed up carefully and shipped to an off-site storage facility. Ellie returned to preschool with a more relaxed smile. Her teacher said, "She talks about you a lot. She says, 'My mom writes books. She's the best storyteller in the world.'" I smiled and squeezed Ellie's hand as we walked past the playground. "I'm just telling the truth, baby," I said. I began writing our story, starting from that fateful message at ballet class to the courtroom where Harper stood at the witness stand. I called the manuscript "Text Message Divorce the Day I Chose Me." It wasn't a book about revenge. It wasn't about bitterness. It was testimony about the resilience of a woman when everyone else pulled away, about how a mother protects her child from things she never imagined she'd face. And most of all, choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival. The manuscript was picked up by an independent publisher right after reading the first chapter. They didn't edit much. They said, "This story is already powerful. We want to preserve your voice." I received letters from women in Arizona, Maine, even Alaska. They wrote about husbands who vanished in the night, manipulative mothers-in-law, forged emails, hidden accounts, and children treated like trophies. One woman wrote, "I used to think I was the only one left standing in the storm, but after reading your story I realized there are so many of us still standing in the rain and still standing strong." One early autumn afternoon, when the sunlight had softened and the breeze danced gently through the half-open windows, Ellie sat at the dining table, carefully coloring a small squirrel postcard. I was washing dishes in the kitchen when she spoke. "Mom, can I write a letter to Dad?" I stopped, the water still running from the faucet tapping steadily against the steel sink. In that brief moment, something stirred in me, a nameless emotion. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. Only something soft, almost tender. I dried my hands and knelt beside her, eye level. "What would you like to say in the letter?" Ellie shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe tell him I can ride my bike without falling now? And that your apple pie tastes better than before?" I brushed her hair gently. "If you want, I'll get envelopes and stamps. But remember, when we write, it's not to expect a reply. We write to let our hearts feel lighter." She nodded, eyes focused, like she was holding on to something important. I returned to my desk and closed my laptop. The reprint draft of Text Message Divorce was in its final editing phase. The publisher had suggested adding a new chapter, not about anger, but what comes after it, peace. I looked around our new apartment. It wasn't big, but the light poured in. The art on the walls was all my choice. An abstract seascape, a large print of Ellie twirling in the park, hair flying, dress flaring like butterfly wings. The sofa was second-hand reupholstered by me in canvas. The wooden table came from a friend in Seattle. Everything in the apartment had a reason to be here. Nothing was excess. Nothing was hidden. Ellie giggled as I sat down beside her. "Mom, what should I draw in the letter?" "Whatever you want," I said, placing my hand gently on her back, feeling her small, warm, steady presence. "A house, maybe?" she asked, eyes squinting mischievously. I smiled. "Sure. But not just the roof and walls. A place where you get to be fully yourself." One day Ellie might understand the deeper meaning of that answer, but today she simply nodded and went back to coloring. I used to think a home meant two parents, a picture-perfect setup, family dinners and framed beach photos. But now I know, home isn't about what it looks like. It's about how it feels when you walk inside. And the home I sat in that afternoon, with my daughter, soft jazz on the radio and the scent of baked goods floating in the air, was a home I had built with my own two hands, from whatever was left after the storm. Not from triumph, but from release. Letting go of the image of a husband who no longer existed. Letting go of the hope that a mother-in-law would ever truly accept me. Letting go of the fear of being misunderstood, abandoned, or alone. I chose to live with the truth, to choose peace over being right. And Ellie, my daughter, is the clearest proof of that choice. Every laugh of hers is a quiet echo from the universe, whispering back to me the path you chose, though rough, was the right one. What do you think? A single text message, could it really mark the beginning of an entire journey to rewrite your fate? I would never wish to go through what I did, but without that fall, I might never have discovered how strong I really am. And you? Have you ever been misunderstood? Pushed out of the very home you once called your own? Only to realize you were the only one who could rebuild it in the way it was always meant to be? Share your story or your thoughts after hearing mine. Because who knows? Your voice might become the lifeline someone else is waiting for. And if you're drawn to stories about family, quiet confrontations that still hold fierce power, follow this channel to hear more tales where wounds aren't hidden and healing doesn't need to shout. Because sometimes the most powerful part of the story